And this is called, or known as, the Great Promise. To put it into perspective, it is spectacular. It is a gift of guaranteed salvation. She got to place her head on the heart of Jesus, on the chest of Jesus.
You should be thanking your husbands for being messy.
Receiving the sacraments at the end of your life and having a happy death is a grace. When I was refamiliarizing myself with the 12 Promises of the Sacred Heart devotion, I was like, oh, nice. You know?
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Not just I'll take that, but I can see it happening, is my point.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you didn't say that.
Yeah, well, I was saying, you kind of jumped in, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
So, anyway, that's all.
Yeah. Welcome to the Trad Line. The topic for today is just in time for June, the month of the Sacred Heart. Our topic is, can you guess it? The Sacred Heart. I don't know if you disagree, but I think we should start with who Saint Mary Margaret Alacoque is.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start just a little
Before her?
before.
Oh, good.
And,
Okay.
yeah. So it's actually funny because on Spotify, there's this page. It doesn't upload new ones, unfortunately, but it's called Traditional Catholic Audiobooks. It has a lot of writings of saints and things, and I, like to, as you know, like to listen to books and things on rather than music and whatever. Well, so there's this one, and I'm actually going to look up the name because I don't remember.
That's one of my favorite things, that you respond to people and they're like, oh, what kind of music do you listen to? You're like, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I listen to books.
And of course,
we do listen to music here and there.
I do
obviously.
there's not that I don't like music, of course.
Yeah. Your favorite genre of music is classic rock.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. But it's just funny because it's true that you don't choose to listen to music when you get to listen to something. So it's just funny.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that.
by myself, I never listen to music really. Even when I work out, I mean, if I'm feeling terribly and I need to pick me up, I'll listen to music. But if, let's just say, the last 50 times I've worked out, probably once
to something. Yeah.
I've listened to music.
Yeah.
Versus a book or something.
I need to start doing that more because when I was bringing the boys over to your parents' house, I was listening to a thing about a saint. And I was like, I need to just put this on more because the boys hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're just so into,
of course,
Vivaldi and Andrea Bocelli.
Classical music is a good thing.
Yeah.
Of course. So.
Yeah, that's true.
It's called The Love of the Sacred Heart by St. Mechtilde. And then I think that was a part of a bigger book that she had.
Sorry, who's she? St. Gertrude?
No.
Oh.
She was the spiritual mother of St. Gertrude. She was St. Mechtilde of Hackborn, Benedictine nun, in the 1200s.
St. Mechtilde of Hackborn?
Yeah.
That's a name.
Her other book was called The Book of Special Grace. Anyway, so what was really interesting to me, because at that particular time, I had never heard of her. I was listening to it, and she was saying all these things about the Sacred Heart, and I was like, well, I thought it said she's from the 1200s, so I look, it's from the 1200s. So she actually had some spiritual, mystical experiences with Jesus as it regarding the Sacred Heart, but it was not necessarily meant to be shared with the world yet.
Yeah.
But she had a lot of these insights, the same sort of thing that we see in the devotion to the Sacred Heart as revealed through St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. And I think what made it so cool, and not that we would expect anything different, but of course it's all the same, right? What Jesus was telling her then is what he's telling St. Margaret Mary, 400 years later. It's just that sort of thing, which is, even though that spirituality wasn't really revealed to the church.
Do you know why she received, Jesus told her about this devotion?
Well, it wasn't so much that, here, I'll have some stuff about her, but it wasn't so much that he told her about the devotion, so much as he kind of educated her on the love of his Sacred Heart. Right? So that's where she learned. So yeah. So he said things, hide yourself in my heart, draw therein all that you need, offer me my heart and I shall receive it as if you offered me all the love of the blessed. Right? So that's talking about, again, part of the Sacred Heart devotion is essentially trying to conform our hearts to Jesus' heart. And, part of that is the will, right? So the two faculties of the soul are the intellect and the will is always understood as the heart, right? Like, because it's the mode of action. So to conform your will to the will of Jesus, in a certain sense, you could also say it's conforming your desires to the desires of Jesus, is essentially conforming your heart, and it's a mutual exchange of hearts, if that makes sense. So just a few things that Jesus also said: every time a person receives me in the Blessed Sacrament, I receive them into my heart. And then he also said, from my heart flows the streams of grace that refresh and sanctify all creatures. So it's just really cool. Again, it's all the same things that we understand today, having had the devotion to the Sacred Heart revealed, that we know these things. And, so when it says flows the streams of grace, right? Like, we think of the mercy, Jesus Christ's heart as the mercy seat, right? I think St. Mechtild called it that as well. And it's also the fount of mercy, right? Like, the lance pierces the heart and blood and water flows. It's the blood and water which sanctifies the church, and obviously us as part of the church. So just seeing that imagery is really cool. And so what you were talking about, so St. Gertrude the Great, another mystic, and this is it's so cool, by the way, the saints of old. So this St. Mechtild mystic, her spiritual daughter in the same monastery was St. Gertrude the Great, she's more well known. And so she had a great devotion to the Sacred Heart as well. I'm trying to think of what were you saying about her that's so exciting?
What St. John?
Oh,
St.
right.
John.
Yeah. So some of her mystical experiences related to the Sacred Heart. So one of her experiences that was especially special is, I guess, she got to place her head on the heart of Jesus, on the chest of Jesus, in the same way St. John did. And she also had, spiritual conversation with St. John. And she essentially asked him, why did you not write about the Sacred Heart and the heart of Jesus? And he said, I was tasked with writing about the eternal Word, right? So if we think about the eternal Word, that's like, in terms of the natures, we can think of the divine nature, right, of Jesus. Whereas in a certain sense, the Sacred Heart represents the humanity of Jesus.
Right.
And that really kind of developed post-Crusades with people visiting the Holy Land and everything. But what he did say is that the devotion to the Sacred Heart is reserved for later in the church, when
it becomes more cold.
Yeah, when sinners' hearts grow cold. And again, going back to kind of like the coolness, as it were, is right. So she's also in the 1200s, I think early 1300s. So it's not for another 300 some odd years that the Sacred Heart devotion comes about. And they're saying, Jesus says that he essentially brought this devotion because hearts grow cold.
Yeah, so he said to St. Margaret Mary, not in her first vision of him, because she actually had visions of him all through like her childhood.
Yeah. Right.
But the first one that had to do with the Sacred Heart, when she was in convent, he said to her that the ingratitude of men towards him and his love for us is more painful to him than everything he suffered in the Passion.
Right.
So that was kind of his like leading thing to her, or in the first vision of him introducing to her the devotion of the Sacred Heart.
So this Sacred Heart that we have here actually has kind of one of the most famous quotes from the devotion, which is, "Behold this heart which has loved men so much that it spared nothing, even exhausting and consuming itself, to testify to them its love, and in return I receive from most only ingratitude." So exactly.
And I didn't realize, too, in the first vision, before he tells her all of the promises and, like, having I'm not sure when he said to have the image, but one of the first things he said was to wear the image actually on your person above, like, on your chest, which I thought was cool. And I used to have a Sacred Heart medal. Yeah. I still do, but the chain broke. But,
yeah.
I mean, we'll get into everything you can do to foster devotion, but that's one cool thing.
Yep.
St. Margaret Mary of Alacoque is the saint who received the visions of Jesus, basically bringing her the devotion of the Sacred Heart to bring to the world. Yeah.
And she's a nun in France, Sisters of the Visitation, and she had visions of Jesus her whole life. But then it wasn't until she was in the convent that she had what we would think of as like the divine mercy. And then the other cool thing, by the way, is one of her first vision, like as it relates to the Sacred Heart, is that it also, just like St. Gertrude and St. John, the first vision was her resting her head on the heart of Jesus.
Her story is really cool if you listen to it. I think they have it, in a book or YouTube form. She was obviously really holy, and she was really young when she was only a nun for 2 years when she started receiving these visions, and her mother superior was very kind of severe and was very skeptical of the visions, as, one would be, especially when you are kind of in charge of this, all of these souls. You want to make sure that you're not falling into any kind of deception. So she had asked for miracles to confirm that St. Margaret Mary was actually receiving these visions, and that the visions, not only was she actually receiving them, but that they weren't from an evil spirit, that it was actually Jesus. And so she had basically asked. There were 2 separate times, I believe. The first time, St. Margaret Mary was very sick, and she said, pray for healing. She prayed for healing and was completely healed the next day, or that day, or immediately. Very, very close to whenever she said the prayer. And then later, when she was having the visions more intensely, and I believe it is when the Sacred Heart visions started, she said again, St. Margaret Mary was very sick with a very high fever. Her mother superior, I forget her name, but she said, she kind of demanded another miracle and said to Margaret Mary, you need to do like all of these things all day for 5 months until the feast of, I forget what the feast is. I want to save the presentation, but I'm not sure. But until this feast, and if you pray for healing to do these tasks within the convent for 5 months, then basically I'll believe that it's true.
Yeah.
So for 5 months she did all of these things, and then on the day of the feast she had a severe regression into her illness, not chronic illness, but her sickness. It became evident to the Mother Superior that basically it was divine intervention from God that she was able to do this work for 5 months. So
interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, just real fast, this book, The Devotion to the Sacred Heart, John Crosset, he was her second spiritual director. The first one, Saint Claude de Colombre, or Colombre, however you say it, the Frenchies. He's a saint now, but this is kind of the book on the devotion to the Sacred Heart. So I try to read it every June. It has the life of Saint Margaret Mary in the beginning, and then all about the devotion in the end. It was actually from this book that I found out about Saint Aloysius Gonzaga, who's very devoted to the Sacred Heart and everything. And so maybe one day I'll be able to convince Olivia to name our kid Aloysius.
I was just thinking the same thing, that you want to name.
But anyway,
Aloysius.
So it's it's a tan book, and I guess we could put a link, but it's really, really good. I suggest anybody who's kind of looking to find more about the Sacred Heart to start with this book. But anyway, as far as the revelations go, it's a very practical revelation, right? So in the sense where there's like just steps to take, filled with amazing grace. And I would say, in my opinion, right, so there's certain devotions, like you can only do so many devotions. But there are certain devotions that really are kind of universal, where it's like, of course you don't have to do it to be saved, but you really should. Like, so one is the rosary, right? Like that's a devotion, but that's one that I would say like everybody should have a devotion to the rosary.
Yeah.
The Sacred Heart is another one. The Immaculate Heart is another one. And the other thing, by the way, with like the Immaculate Heart of Mary is it can be done in different ways, right? So for instance, for us, we kind of have a devotion through Our Lady of Sorrows to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, where
she's one you want for if you have children, and
Our Lady of Sorrows.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's and like so they're very closely connected. And then the last one that's very closely connected to the Sacred Heart is the Holy Face, which is another one that I think is really fantastic. Those are ones where it's maybe you should have it.
Yeah.
And then of course you can have different ones to different saints, and you can't overload yourself. But it's those.
You can also kind of move through them in a sense. I know I asked you one time, because when we first met, you had like a really strong devotion to Divine Mercy, and then I think it was a few years ago I had asked you like, oh yeah, what about like you don't really have that strong of a devotion to Divine Mercy anymore. You had kind of started fostering the devotion to the Holy Face, and anyways.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say, just because of, we'll probably hear about it, Divine Mercy is something that I don't really have a devotion to anymore. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's real or legitimate devotion. I think a lot of the arguments against the devotion or why it doesn't work are just not very good. I've never been convinced by them. And I almost, in a certain sense, I like tried to be convinced by it. Not in the sense where I didn't want it to be true, but it was kind of like, okay.
You want to be sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So, in essence, right, the way I see it is like the divine mercy is Jesus reaching out in compassion, right? Sacred Heart is in that reaching out. So compassion essentially, or mercy, is love in action, right? So in response to that love, you are returning love for love. So in the divine mercy, in a certain sense, your action in return is accepting the mercy. When we say that mercy is for the contrite, what we're really saying is you have to accept the mercy, right? Like Jesus' mercy is going towards you, but through repentance is how you accept it. So then in the Sacred Heart, it's returning love for love, right? So like you've, in a certain sense, you've accepted the mercy, and due to that, you are returning love for love in the sense of you're developing and cultivating charity, right? So like when we think of enkindling, or when Jesus says, how I wish the world were already kindled, what he is saying is like lit on fire with charity. And then the holy face, in a sense, is making reparation, especially for offenses against the first 3 commandments. So, and that reparation, in essence, is you're taking part, in a certain sense, in that mission of God, where you are, and it's kind of like the next step of the consoling spirituality in the Sacred Heart. We are consoling the heart of Jesus, and in a very similar way, we're doing that in the Holy Face devotion, and we're wiping the face of Jesus in the sense that for all of the ingratitude, the offenses against him, that we are now making reparation on that behalf. So that's kind of like the
it's almost space. Like, I don't want to say a ladder, but it's like I feel like a good visual is you have Jesus crucified, you have the blood and water gushing from his heart, which would signify the divine mercy. And it's like that first step is going up to the cross, receiving that, like being, receiving the mercy and being kind of cleansed. Yeah. And then that makes you more able to conform your heart to his. Like, in the vision of Saint Margaret Mary, she gives her heart to him, and he places her heart inside of his heart. Right. And then, and as Father Ripperger would say, but you're trying to conform your heart to his, and Jesus says, I am meek and humble of heart. Right. So you're going from like repentance and receiving the mercy and to then trying to become meek and humble and of course grow in charity. And then, and then the Holy Face. The Holy Face one is cool, and that's kind of still more new to me. You've been doing it for, I think, a little bit more. Or did we start at the same time? It doesn't matter.
Well, we've been in the confraternity of the Holy Face for the same amount of time, because I signed us all up. Right.
I think what I meant is you've been reading and doing the chaplet yourself for longer than, and I've done it a few times with you, but... Yes. Anyway, so I that just made sense to me when I thought about devotions, because it can be kind of like overwhelming and tricky when you're like, there are so many devotions. Which ones should I do? Do I only do the ones that seem like so? Yeah,
right. I think. Well, it's interesting because it is so naturally conducive, right? So we think of Saint Therese, and her whole thing is merciful love of God, but she was also Saint Therese of the Child Jesus and the Holy Face. Yeah. So the Holy Face was a great, great devotion of hers. And her sister, her biological sister, was also a Carmelite nun, and she was St. Genevieve of the Holy Face. So it was a very important...
And it's interesting, is it just that the title was too long that they stopped saying that? Or was it too
Genevieve of the Holy Face is always called that. No, but as far as the little flower... St. Therese, It's a good question. It is interesting because, like, for instance, the parish that my mom grew up at, and actually I was baptized, was called the Little Flower, but that was never a title. It was a kind of a nickname or whatever, but it wasn't. It was Child Jesus. It was
my little Catholic girls group was Saint Therese of the Little Flowers.
Yeah. So,
It's almost like it was forgotten or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, it's interesting if you talk to Father Carney. He has some interesting, and I think we'll do a devotion on the Holy Face, but he has an interesting take on his thoughts as it relates to the Holy Face and its relation to communism. And that because the communists have gotten such a hold on the world, that they've really pushed that.
Because it's such
away.
an important devotion,
Yeah,
but you almost never hear about it at all.
Don't, yeah.
So that should be maybe another episode.
Yeah, no, I think we definitely will do the Holy Face because I would say that's kind of the preeminent devotion of our
time.
Family.
Oh, of our family and of our time.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to think. Yeah, Sacred Heart and
Holy Face.
And Holy Face, but they're very naturally connected. But anyway, I think the big thing about the Sacred Heart that's so cool in the Revelation, right? There's 12 promises that we wanted to go over. And that's what I was saying at the very beginning is as I was rereading these promises.
Oh, I've got to tell this story. Sorry, go ahead.
And rereading these promises, and some of them, especially as it relates to the peace in the home and the graces in the state of life, and the ability to deal with and handle things in ways that kind of in retrospect, you're like, man, I guess you could really see it at work there.
Yeah.
And I think especially as we kind of talk to or deal with families so much, and people who are listening in general have families, young families, they want to have families, is what this can do for the home life.
Yeah.
Because something that I think it's easy to take for granted, and it's very, it's a very sad thing, is because of the size of your, pages and things, the number of things we hear about different, family issues, whether it's with in-laws or with spouses and things or children, and it's just really sad. And there's things here that can really help folks with that.
Well, one of the promises is order in the home, which we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a couple more things about St. Margaret Mary, just because for me, at least, I love hearing these things about the person who received a particular devotion. So like, for example, with Mystical City of God, I loved hearing all these things about Blessed or Venerable Mary of Agreda, because you hear these things and you're like, man, not that there's any reason to be skeptical, of course, especially because St. Margaret Mary is canonized, but I loved this story when she was in the convent. One of her sisters, not biological sisters, was like working in the garden. She got this deep wound somewhere on her leg or something, and she didn't want anyone to know because she basically didn't want the attention of having this big wound. Or something.
The sister?
The sister, yes. A sister in the convent with St. Margaret Mary. So she was out in the garden, didn't want to make a big fuss about it. St. Margaret Mary was passing her, and she reached out and touched her habit, and her wound healed.
That's awesome. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I just listened to that today, and I was like, that is so... Because a lot of the sisters knew she was going to be a saint at some point. And then it was the story of her death is really amazing too, because she kind of prophesied her death. And she said it's going to happen kind of when you least expect it. And these two sisters are going to be holding me. And they all kind of were like, no, it's not. You're only in your 40s. You're not going to die.
Right.
And then fast forward to when she did. She had gotten like just a fever, nothing crazy. The doctor said she'd be okay. And a long story short, she asked for last rites. They wouldn't give it to her because they were like, you're not dying. She finally was able to receive it. And then she kind of had like almost like a convulsion, like a very minor convulsion. And so two sisters who were there ran to her to help her. And it was the two sisters that and they didn't realize it at the time, but after they realized it, that she said would be holding me when she died. And she passed away.
Cool. Yeah, that's such a fun story.
Yeah. So anyways, she's a really cool saint if you read about her in this book or like such as.
So the devotion has several aspects, right? So it's reparation, frequent communion, and consecration, right? And part of what's come out of the devotion is the enthronement. So actually we have another. So for us, can they see this? Yeah. Okay, so they can see it. So that's our Sacred Heart. So then we also have this Sacred Heart someplace else. We just put it there for this. It goes over there. Yeah, for the episode. And the Immaculate Heart of Mary's right there. But the enthronement to the Sacred Heart is something, in the Immaculate Heart, that's something everybody should do. And you're consecrating your house and your family to the Sacred Heart. And what you're essentially doing is you're consecrating your house and you're acknowledging the social kingship of Christ, right? So of course we all are working for the kingship of Christ in the world, in our communities, in for United States, towns, counties, countries, states, and other countries, however they, have their, province or whatever, province, country, etc. So
Region.
we work towards that, but where it begins is in the home. So by having the Sacred Heart as the enthronement is, we're saying this house is a house of Jesus Christ, and he's the king here. And so this is another good book. It's called The Enthronement of the Sacred Heart, and it talks all about that.
Mm-hmm. It's important.
But it's yeah.
You're supposed to have an image of the Sacred Heart somewhere,
in a prominent
central,
place.
prominent,
Mm-hmm.
yes, in a prominent place where you can pass by and admire it often, basically. Yep. So that's what we have in here. We also have, there's a little gold Sacred Heart emblem or pendant. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but it hangs on the wall and it actually opens. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite things to gift for weddings, or if I wasn't at the person's wedding, for a baptism, anything like that. And I include the name, for a wedding especially, I put the names of the couple. Mm-hmm. And then I'll put a note, as you have your children, add the name of each child. Yeah. And it's just kind of a visual of like you're putting yourselves and your whole family kind of united to the heart of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So I'll link that as well.
Perfect. Well, anyway, so the first promise, so there's 12 promises that were made by Jesus to St. Margaret Mary of the Sacred Heart. And the first promise is, I will give them all the graces necessary in their state of life. Mm-hmm. So state of life, of course, is a combination of things, in the sense that it's not just, are you a religious or a priest or like a married person?
Sorry, my eyes are so
right?
dry.
So that's your primary state. If you're a wife and mother, you're a husband and father. But it also goes down into, the minutia of the state in life, right? So if you're a lawyer, or you're an accountant, or a doctor, or a garbage man, whatever, that's your state in life as well. In the macro, it's if you're married or religious, and then even down to those daily duties. And I think what's so important, as we talk about the importance of gender roles and the order in the family, is the big thing is being able to, how you have that outlook on the difficulties of your day-to-day life, on things that you might not want to do, but how you are able to essentially sanctify those and have the grace of really not only making it a prayer, but finding joy in doing those things that maybe before you didn't, right? And so that's something, and I think maybe you want to talk about your experience, because that was something that you really noticed over time, a change.
Yeah, so not to throw you under the bus or anything, because you're wonderful, but I'd say from the time we were, well, I shouldn't say from the time we were, but I basically do everything within the home when it comes to, like domestic chores. So laundry, dishes, I'm not going to say cooking. I do not really consistently cook, but, and I would notice a lot, now this is probably a few years ago now that I would have more of these struggles. I still have them, by the way, but they're much easier to say, like, what are you doing? But yeah, like just like the little things that you deal with every day as a homemaker, where it's like sometimes I could feel like I was just like nonstop cleaning up after you. But not like in a, I don't know, just like, okay, it would be little things like this. And I'm sure everyone can relate to this, is like, he put his cup in the sink. Why didn't he put it in the dishwasher? It could start with something like that, and then it snowballs.
Except that's not a good example, because when we were very first married,
I'm not talking about that, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm just talking about the things like...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've recently been getting so much more into the habit of putting it directly in the dishwasher.
You have?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, anyways, that's just a good example. Like that.
Because it's funny. I was literally thinking the other day, and we do have to cut this out because now we're just blabbering. But I was literally thinking the other day, I was like, why did she let it all gang up versus like putting things in the dishwasher?
You know what's so cute about that though is if you could just like live my morning, for example, for like whatever.
Yeah.
You could see how like it's not always the easiest thing to do. Like it sounds easy in theory to just like just put it in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
But I have Francis who loves to attack the dishwasher. And then it's like I'm usually doing at least 3 things at the same time. So it's oftentimes not a priority. I just have to like chuck it in.
Yeah.
Anyways, but that's a good example is like, okay, it's in the sink, why didn't he put it in the dishwasher? Or like, oh, he made something on the counter and like didn't put the stuff back or like didn't do this or didn't do that. Those little things.
Yeah.
It's really easy to like, if you let yourself have that mindset, because, you know, that's your thing. You're not the best at cleaning up after yourself. Okay, but for the one little thing, you have a million amazing things. And that's my point is like every spouse is going to have something that you would want to change. But like that's ridiculous because no spouse is going to be perfect. And it's the same for me. So my point is you take those little things in my state of life. Those are those little things that I can say like, oh, wait, I can just do this for him because I love him. It's a way to serve him. It's a way it becomes a prayer. It sanctifies me. And not only that, but it's like now we in turn don't have a miserable marriage where like I'm nagging you to do these things and then it makes you not want to do them because I'm nagging you. So then you don't do them.
It's like the
and then I'm annoyed.
Movie.
Yeah.
I want you to want to do the dishes. Why would I want to?
Yeah, and that's not to say that I'm never like if there's something that really frustrates me, like the shaker bottles not being unscrewed, because I can't unscrew them when my hands are wet, I'll say to you, like, can you just please unscrew the lid? So that's fine. I'm not saying never say anything. Yeah. But the whole point is you're doing these things that maybe normally your normal inclination, which is the devil, by the way, getting into your brain and saying, oh, he's not thinking of you. He doesn't care about you. He's not thinking about your time. He's not thinking that you're doing, like, that's so the devil. Yeah. Where it's like, you truly aren't. Like, you're just like, you're not. So anyways, so but it's those kinds of things where in the beginning or like before you really start to honestly try to become holy and virtuous, these things will get to you and like can eat away you. And you have to just say to yourself like, okay, this is a prayer. I'm doing it out of love. Yeah. And then, the more you foster these devotions and build a prayer life or whatever, it becomes much easier. Like I don't struggle with that on the day-to-day anymore. Right. Once in a while, if I'm tired or if it's been a month since I've gone to confession or something, then I can like kind of feel it creeping in again. But that's a good example of just Yeah.
Now let me tell you about all of Olivia's faults. No.
I have a lot of them. Wow, I'm so humble.
No, but anyway, exactly right. The point, of course, is that it's like, it's grace ultimately that allows you to make that switch. Because in the beginning, when you're becoming married and stuff, and you're learning those things as
it's an adjustment.
It's an adjustment.
And I always think of the Blessed Mother in Mystical City of God. St. Joseph knows at this point she's the Mother of God, and she wants, part of her duty is to scrub the floor every single day. And he doesn't want her to. He wants to do it for her because she's the Mother of God. Yeah. And he can't fathom the fact that the Mother of God is down on the floor, scrubbing the floors on her hands and knees. And it's such an interesting thing to read too, because she doesn't say like, okay, fine, you do it. And she doesn't say, no, it's my duty, I'm doing it. But she basically, out of humility and obedience to her husband, says, will you please allow me to scrub the floors? And in the book, it's really just so, I don't want to call St. Joseph precious, but he doesn't want to let her, but he does, again, out of humility. But anyways, it's like, she's begging basically to scrub the floors, and then I'm going to complain because I have to put your cup in the dishwasher. It's just a funny
Right. And again,
Contrast
going back
there.
to that is doing those things, the merit in them is based on the on the measure of love that they're done with.
Yes, and that was my point, by the way, is she was thanking him for letting her do these chores.
Right.
So you should be thanking your husbands for being messy.
Okay, so number 2 is I'll establish peace in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
This is obviously a huge one. And this is another gift of the enthronement, right? Is you let Jesus reign in your home. This is kind of one of the ones that I was really thinking of when I was reading back through the promises. Because if you think about it, like everybody has problems, right? Like life, life, there's sufferings. I was actually just talking to a guy today. He just got home. His daughter had really bad salmonella, so they were in the hospital for like 4 days.
She had salmonella?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so it was a whole long thing because apparently it takes a while for the test to come back positive for them to be able to treat it. And so obviously in that time frame they're getting a little sicker. Whatever. Point is, so then I was like, oh yeah, that's so stressful, and I kind of remembered Charlie's intussusception thing.
That was the worst.
But my point is that things happen to everybody. There's always stressful things, etc. But as far as the peace in our home, like in our house, like between us and our children, we have an incredibly peaceful life. Like we don't really have big arguments over anything. We don't really yell at each other ever. And, like same thing. Well, our kids are too young to be having any real issue. But, anyway.
Yeah.
That was just the point. And I was, when I was thinking about that, I was just like what a blessing it is.
Yeah, it is.
To have that. And, just keeping in mind, it's a promise. It's something like you can take Jesus Christ's words to the bank.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
It's just, again, doing those things. And the second one is like a comfort them in all of their afflictions.
The third one.
Sorry. But yes, it's the third one, but it's the second one that I was kind of thinking.
Oh, okay. The third promise and the second one that you were.
Yeah, because again, these last kind of year and a half has been incredibly stressful. Again, not within the home, without the home, for different things, and just like when I tell people about stuff that's happened, it's like it's just funny how much more disturbed they are about it or related to it than I am. And again, I'm not taking the credit. I'm just saying, looking again to.
Yeah, no, I think the whole point of this whole thing is we're not trying to say how great we are and look how perfect we are, but more point to the fruits that come from fostering this devotion.
No, exactly.
We're not trying to sit here and boast or brag, but it's like
right. No, that's really my point.
Yeah.
Is that like it's in retrospect that I've been able to kind of realize those things of the grace working in those places.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point it out too.
Yeah.
Not just.
Obviously, their secure refuge during life.
This is number 4.
Number 4, and above all, in death. So again, it's just a place to go that we can trust in the love of God. And
I think
and place our difficulties, life, etc., in His hands. Okay, so number 5 is I'll bestow abundant blessings upon all of their undertakings. So, just the things that you're doing in life, that they will receive blessings to be successful. And I think the other way to think about that, of course, is if things don't necessarily work out the way you think they should or want to, understanding that is better anyways, right? So that's really... things work out for the best in those sense. Number 6, sinners shall find in my heart the source and infinite ocean of mercy. So again, it's like the love of Christ is so profound, and most importantly, what is mercy? It's essentially that love in action, where He reaches down and snatches us, and then we just have to have confidence in it, right? So that's really what this saying is, that if you have confidence in the mercy of God, it is there. That's
such a touching His cloak thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like how many people were near Jesus or touched His cloak that weren't healed or weren't whatever, but then when you do it in faith, it heals you.
Yep. Yeah, it's similar to the centurion, right? Who says, I'm not worthy that you enter under my roof, just say the word. Okay, next one is lukewarm souls shall become fervent. Right, so actually we talked about this a little bit earlier with the enkindle, right? The fire of charity, right? So Jesus says, if you are neither hot nor cold but lukewarm, I'll vomit you from my mouth. So meditating on the Sacred Heart, like what Jesus has done for us in the crucifixion, like the passion and resurrection, and then again, the focusing on the Sacred Heart is contemplating the love that he has for us. And we forgot to mention the Jansenists, by the way.
Did we say it was the 1600s that Saint Margaret Mary?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when the...
Yeah, so it was just after the Jansenism, okay, which basically Jansenism was a condemned heresy that said that you had to be perfect
to approach Jesus,
both in a certain sense in prayer, but most especially in the Eucharist and things. So people, it was in a certain sense like a naturalism where it's like you had to make yourself perfect, but there's a lot of scrupulosity that sort of originates there, and so this is ultimately a lack of charity. Is what it was.
Yeah.
And this devotion came about shortly after that in response to it. So, but lukewarm souls become fervent. So yeah, I mean, we want to be on fire for Christ, and so a devotion to this helps that. It helps when you think about, and it's true in person-to-person relationships. So like if I think about everything you've done for me, how much you love me, blah, 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 it grows my love for you, right? Like person to person. In a similar sense, the devotion to the Sacred Heart, because it's ultimately a devotion of charity, right? And a meditation on the charity that Christ has for us, it will in turn increase our charity. So, okay. Fervent souls shall quickly mount to high perfection.
This is 5.
This is 8. Good counting. Fervent souls. So again, fervent, that's essentially like, so you've done the enkindling now, right? So you maybe were lukewarm. Now you're an on fire soul. And so quickly mount to high perfection, right? So this is something that I think I'm really, I guess, passionate about. But something like that really interests me is
it's kind
prayer.
of a whole thing.
Yeah. And sanctification and things. And so like what does it really mean to like reach high levels of perfection, to really actually strive, to really heed the call of be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And again, these devotions give us shorter paths, shortcuts to reach those high marks of perfection, which again, it's something that we're all called to. Like, so when people say somebody's called, everyone's called to everything today, but that is actually something you're actually called to.
Yeah.
It's the, to reach the transforming union in this life. Almost nobody does. Even priests and religious. Again, that's something I think a lot of people get wrong. So many people think they reach heights that they never do. I'd say probably at least 9 out of 10 people never get out of the purgative way. And so it's a shortcut, right? Okay. So number 9, I'll bless every place where an image of my heart shall be exposed and honored, right? Again, Enthronement of the Sacred Heart, St. Paul, but it's really fantastic. And again, it's all about the kingship of Christ, is that you're giving him a domain, right? So you're giving domain of your home and of your heart and of your family. Okay.
Number
10. I will give to priests the gift of touching the most hardened hearts. Obviously, we're not priests.
So cool.
Maybe we get a priest here or there who listens, but I hope every priest is devoted to the Sacred Heart. And again, especially in these days where we have such entrenched sin, that ability is paramount, really. Okay. Those who promote this devotion shall have their names written in my heart, never to be effaced. Talking about, hey.
Get out there and promote it.
Yeah. So that's why, that's one reason why we're doing this as well as the Holy Face, because there are promises related to spreading it. And it's not just this video, but when you tell people in your family, in your parish.
Yeah, you don't need to start a podcast.
No, or not only that, but, share this podcast. Go find, Google, Sacred Heart devotion and text it to some friends or whatever.
Yeah.
That is doing it as well. And then the other thing, so actually Papa did this years ago.
Yeah.
But you can start an enthronement society. So it depends on your parish. Some parishes are bigger on it than others. But basically it's a group that helps folks in your parish and encourages people in your parish to enthrone yourselves to the Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
To enthrone homes. And some will even do, so like what they did was they would do it and they would kind of help you do it and say, oh, here's the prayers. Here's where, like you can order the pictures from. It's like a kit. And then, you call in the priest will come and do it for you. You can do it yourself technically. But you want to have a priest do it.
Yeah. And
I think they would even come in support, right? So some people they felt odd doing it. So they would go and have like little gatherings to do it and have like a little coffee party or whatever, lunch and after. But those are the sorts of things that you can do to spread the devotion. And then the big one, the last one.
Number 12.
Number 12. I promise you in the excessive mercy of my heart that my all-powerful love will grant to all those who receive Holy Communion on the first Fridays in 9 consecutive months the grace of final penitence. And this is called or known as the Great Promise. So to put it into perspective, because it is spectacular, because it is a gift of guaranteed salvation. Now, does that mean that if you did it for sure, like, can you know that you received the Eucharist properly disposed? That's why you're supposed to take confession. You want, now, if you don't have a mortal sin on your soul, of course you can do it, but just take confession in the week leading up to it to really just be sure. But that's what this promise is offering, is a final penitence, right?
Which is?
Yeah. Final penitence is essentially confessing your sins, or meaning you repent in the final moments of your life, whether it's through perfect contrition or if it's receiving the sacraments of the church. By the way, praying for a happy death meaning in the grace of God, and by that way, like receiving last sacraments, is something that everybody should pray for, because it is a grace. That's something that's really important to remember. Receiving the sacraments at the end of your life and having a happy death is a grace. Final penitence, the grace of conversion or the grace of of repentance at the end of your life, is a grace.
Yeah.
And St. Alphonsus would say that it also is a matter of habit, right? So if you're habitually a contrite person, right? So you go to confession on a regular basis, you try to live the Catholic faith as best as you can, you will be habituated in that way, such that it's a virtue, such that you're more likely to repent at the end of your life anyways.
Yeah.
Similarly, or contrarily, if you're somebody who is habitually unrepentant, that it's more than likely that not only will you not merit the grace for repentance in the end of your life, but you are not sort of conducive. Your life is not conducive to repenting at the end of your life.
Right.
Because there's no reason to think that there should be some sort of magic change. Now,
yeah.
But at the same time, don't forget that we can merit things for sinners, meaning hardened sinners, unrepentant sinners. We're all sinners. I know I have to say this, but there's always somebody, hey, you're a sinner. But that's why we pray for folks, so that to merit the grace that they won't merit for themselves because they ignore it. But anyway, that is the key. So you were beginning to tell a story.
Yes. It's Father Ripperger who tells this story, who I heard it from. But there was a man, and when he was a boy, his mother, after he made his first communion, his mother brought him to the first 9 Fridays.
Yep.
And then when he was grown, he decided he wanted to do it for himself, so he did it again. He got into some kind of horrible accident. I think it was a car accident. He was in a coma for 5 days. And each day that he was in the coma, a different priest came to him to either give him or make sure that he got his last rites. And even the bishop made sure that he got them, which I think the whole point is like, why was the bishop making sure this random man got his last rites? So he passed away. His sister knew that he had this devotion to the Sacred Heart and did the first Fridays. And she wanted to know basically that he was in heaven. She wanted it like confirmed he was in heaven. So she prayed the novena to Saint Therese. I don't know how well known this novena is, but basically you pray this 9-day novena to Saint Therese, and you're kind of like, you're asking about something, whether it's, is my brother in heaven, or should I do this thing or not, or which thing should I do? And you can pray this novena and ask basically for this miracle of receiving or seeing roses as an answer.
But real quick, just to be clear, it is not a magic bullet, so it's important to not be superstitious about it. Which is, if you pray it and you don't get roses, just keep praying.
I think Father Ripperger said it's a grace. So if you pray this novena and you get it, then that's a grace.
Yeah, no, I just want to be clear.
To clarify, definitely should clarify. Because it is one of those things where, like, when you first hear it, you're like, that sounds wacky. But anyways, so the sister prays this novena, and basically she says the whole thing is, after this novena, if something happens with roses, then I'll know he's in heaven. So she prays the novena. Her husband shows up after work with 24 roses, and it was the first and only time, and he was unaware that she was doing this novena, that he brought her roses. So
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so, and of course that was a grace. It doesn't mean that if she didn't get roses, her brother wasn't in heaven, but it was a grace for her to know, yes, your brother who is devoted to the Sacred Heart and did this devotion of the first Fridays is in heaven. So I just thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah. So what are we suggesting? Well, first of all, we're recording this on the Friday. So a week from today is the first Friday of June. June is the month of the Sacred Heart. So that's why we're doing it, is because there's no better time to cultivate a devotion to the Sacred Heart. And then this Friday is a great time to start your devotion to the first 9 Fridays.
Yeah.
And especially for parents, right? This is the sort of thing where not only do you want to do the enthronement and everything like that, but start taking your kids, the ones who can receive, especially, do the 9 Fridays with them. You know, I mean, in a certain sense, you can help them to guarantee their salvation. Because I mean, that's what. So that, and just to be clear, that's what you're basically just saying, right? Like that, by having final penitence, you are. If you have final penitence, you are saved. By doing that, it's such a great gift to give to your children.
Yeah, I want to do it again. So I want to ask you too, when you're doing, and it's funny because when we first did the first 9 Fridays, which I was pregnant with Cashin, it was actually exactly through my whole 9 months of pregnancy with him, which I always thought was so cool. Our very last Friday of the 9th Friday was right around my due date with him. And I remember thinking through the whole pregnancy, am I going to make it to my last first Friday? And we went I remember we woke up early, and it was my mom was still with us. So he was only a few days old.
Yeah,
and we
he
made
was.
it.
Yeah, because he was born on Monday, and it was the Friday.
Yeah, and we made it, and it was really cool starting the 9 Fridays, being like just pregnant, and then ending it with him in my arms. And I will never forget Father Huffman at St. Peter's. When I was kneeling down for communion with him in my arms, he came up with, and he was about to give me the Eucharist, and the altar boy put the paten under my chin, and he said, "Just a second, I need to see this one."
Oh, yeah.
And because,
Yep.
gosh, I forgot about this. He would bless me. He would give me the Eucharist, and then bless the baby in my womb every time I went up for communion. And then that very last, I forgot about that. That very last Friday, he kind of did the final blessing, and he was actually born. That was really special. But my question was, I digress there. My question was, when you're going to Mass on these Fridays and receiving the Eucharist, is there anything you should be saying, like, as you're going up for communion, or while you're receiving communion, or while you're on your way to Mass?
Well, you want to offer it in reparation for sins against the Sacred Heart, right?
So can you say that, do you say that in turn, like, in your head as you're receiving it?
No, I think you can just, like, make the intention.
Yeah, like, on that day.
On that day. Or I think even if really, to my knowledge, and someone can correct me, but to my knowledge, there's nothing that says you need to be kneeling there, right? Yeah. So, like, if you're saying, okay, so I'm supposed to do these first 9 Fridays in reparation to the Sacred Heart, and I'm doing it for that purpose, that's your intention. You don't have to be thinking, like, am I doing it?
Yeah, I kind of had that when we were doing it. It was like, oh no, did I say it when I was going to communion?
Yeah, but it's like that's the point. I mean, the point of First Fridays and First Saturdays, like, that's the whole reason you're doing it. Yeah. Also, going back to the enthronement, by the way, and I kind of said this about the social kingship of Christ, but I just had some notes, and it reminded me because Pope Pius XII consecrated the world to the Sacred Heart, but. Right. And along with the Holy Face is these devotions are they're really kind of like the remedy to atheism, secularism, socialism, communism, isms. And that's like, so when people say, because I think one of my biggest, concerns is the world that our kids are getting raised in and like are going to have to live in. Yeah. And devotion to the Sacred Heart, beginning it in the family, is such a great way to begin to change it, right? Like, if you live and create a saintly home, we can't see the effects that has. Because don't forget, it's not just the sort of tangential or adjacent effects, meaning like, oh, you are a saintly person, so then you meet people and that affects them, because that's true. But there's also things that by any merit that you have, etc., and especially if you've ever consecrated yourself to the Sacred Heart, when you consecrate yourself, especially if you do it like to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary, right? Which I would like to go over also eventually, is total consecration to Mary, is that you're giving up the value of those merits. So there are things, like, by living a holy life, there are things that God can do with that charity, essentially, to change the world that can't be done otherwise. That's why, for instance, Saint Therese, even though she never left her convent, was patron of missions, because she prayed for them so fervently. Yeah, what did I say?
I think you said convent.
Oh.
The reason even though she never left her convent, she's the patron of missions.
Correct, patroness of missions. Yeah. So it's, and it's the same thing with like a mother. That's what we talk about.
Yeah. I was going to say, that's why we get so frustrated with.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Is that if you're
there's anything more important you could be doing.
Yeah, but not, and it's not only that, but like people say, oh, all the good that I do. And it's the same sort of thing, which is, if you do your state in life with a great amount of charity, the value of that, not only eternally speaking, meaning like in merit for heaven, but even temporally, in the sense that what changes the world is charity, right? So that's when Jesus said, how I wish it was already burning. is so much more than any good that you could conceivably do as an individual person, right? Doing something else. Oh, well, why not? I'm a doctor, as an example. The good that you do as a doctor is good, but it is not as good as perfectly being the wife and mother. And that is not only true, again, in the eternal sense, but it's true in the temporal sense. And again, that's why the church has always understood that the monasteries and convents were the great bulwark against evil in this world, because their prayers and sufferings merit the grace necessary to protect the world. And that's why I'm also so passionate about bringing back traditional monasteries, etc. But those are the things that change the world. It's because it's God is the primary mover. It's not us, right? So yes, we have to cooperate in the ways that we can, but when we create ways to cooperate on our own terms, the effect, even though we might perceive it as greater because it's proximate to us, it's not. So anyway.
Okay, so doing the enthronement of the Sacred Heart, having your Sacred Heart artwork in the center of your home or a prominent spot in your home. I think too, if you can, having something on that's of the Sacred Heart is kind of,
I actually have to get a new one. I had my scapular.
I know, you had it on there. And then, the first 9 Fridays is like the big thing. And the enthronement, I would say.
Yeah, yep.
And then there's also a litany to the Sacred Heart that you can start praying.
You can do that. You can meditate on the Sacred Heart. I think the big one from a meditation standpoint is learn of me, for I'm meek and humble of heart.
Yes.
All right. Very good.